Hi, welcome to the Elle Russ Show, where I deliver content intended to inspire, educate, and motivate. Engage with me online at elleruss.com and on social media. Enjoy the show. Today, my guest is Lauren Grace Martinson, founder of LGM Hypnosis. She's a certified clinical hypnotherapist specializing in mindset coaching. In addition to hypnosis, Lauren brings a wide range of modalities, including neurolinguistic programming and shadow work. Her client list is a mix of entrepreneurs, artists, and individuals looking to take their careers and relationships to the next level. In addition to her private clients, Lauren works at an addiction treatment facility in Malibu, California, and is also currently working on a new book about her life and her approach to empowering you to live your best life. Enjoy the show. Hey, Lauren, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So I find hypnosis to be such a fascinating topic, and I think still people might be misinterpreting either its uses or what it is. So we'll get into that in a minute. I will say that I've found it beneficial for myself in the past. But for starters, I mean, I know that nowadays, we don't think someone's going to like make you cluck like a chicken and put a pendulum in front of you, like, in the old movies. But tell us, like, how did hypnosis start? Who invented it? Or, how did this even come about in the world?
What's fascinating about that is you'd be surprised how many people still feel that you can be controlled somehow and you will cluck like a chicken or bark like a dog or make a fool of yourself. So I do have to dispel that misconception most often. But really it came about, hypnosis has been around for over 5,000 years. It was practiced in ancient Egypt. They had these things called sleep temples, and basically you would go there and you would be, put under essentially. And it was all about the answer to whatever you were going through or some sort of healing that you needed would be revealed to you. And this quickly traveled to Greece, and they kind of took it up a notch where they would put snakes in these chambers with you because that was the symbol for the god of healing. So and then fast forward to 18th century, that's when Franz Mesmer came across it, but he thought it was animal magnetism. That's what he labeled it as. And he thought he could manipulate this sort of magnetic field in his patients. And he was eventually laughed out of the community of science. And people didn't take him seriously. They were like, this is just hokey BS and it's not accurate. That's where also like the term mesmerism comes from, mesmerized. And then James Braid, who was a philosopher and surgeon in the 19th century, came about, and he's the one who coined the term hypnosis. So that's the term that we use even today. So that's where hypnosis was coined. And then we go into fast forward Milton Erickson, who was in the 20th century, and he's like the godfather of hypnosis now. Everyone always refers to Ericksonian hypnosis. He was a psychiatrist, he was a genius, and he looked at the subconscious mind as that is where all of our answers lie. We just need to uncover what's in the subconscious mind, and that's where we can gain our answers to whatever issues or problems we're dealing with. And he was more to do with metaphors. Like metaphors is his way of communicating with the subconscious. I was trained in Kapucinian hypnosis, which is more direct. So John Kappas was the person who started the school that I went to. He's a little bit more direct, which I personally like because I'm more of a direct person anyway. So direct suggestions. And it really just depends on the person, because some people do better with metaphors and then some people do better with direct suggestions. It just really depends on the person. And it's not to say that if you do Ericksonian, you can't do direct. And it's not to say that if you do Kapucinian, you can't do metaphors. But fast forward, that's kind of where we are today. So, hypnosis is huge today in a lot of different ways with anxiety, weight loss, smoking cessation is the biggest one that people hear about. It's also dentists are starting to use it for people that can't be put under. They will use hypnosis instead, which is pretty cool. It's also accepted by the medical.
I was like, I would not risk that shit myself.
Oh, me neither.
I'd be like, nope, I don't even care how anxiety I am. I don't want to risk it. But yeah.
No, me neither. Luckily, I can, do anesthesia or any of these things. So that's not an issue for me. But for the people, it's great to have that option, though, for people who can't. Yeah.
Well, and also just want to mention too. So one of the reason I even
know about this or at all a little bit is because I have a friend who's, I don't know, she's probably in her late 70s now. Her name is Michelle Leclaire O'Neill. If you went to her website, guys, because this is all about childbirthing and hypnosis, it's leclairemethod.com, and that's Leclaire. And I mentioned her because she invented the word hypnobirthing back in the 80s. She literally coined that term. Then someone tried to copy it. She sued them, and now the trademark for that word is open, right? So nobody can trademark it. But she wrote a book on hypnobirthing, and then later on in life, the studies bore out to be true for her. I think they did an Israeli study that hypnosis increased the chances of IVF by like 40 or 60%, I forget, but it was a minimum of 40% increased the chance. And then she also dealt with people because she's a reproductive psychologist. So people come to her to deal with either helping babies turn around, so they could have a natural childbirth versus a cesarean, connecting. And I was so fascinated. She still does this. All her work is pregnancy and hypnosis and getting in tune. And again, for reproductive psychology too, women who have trouble getting pregnant. So I was around her a lot and was just fascinated by this whole notion. And so now, not to say that you couldn't work with people that are dealing with pregnancy, but let's talk about some of the uses for this. You mentioned a few. Give us a couple of examples of people who came to you or clients you've experienced with other people that do what you do, who kind of took a 180 or they came to you for this one thing, and then this is where they ended up.
Yeah. And it really depends on the person, but the more suggestible that you are, meaning basically the more open you are, let's say the less defenses that you have. I'm someone who has more defenses, so it's harder for me. It takes me longer when I'm doing hypnosis or someone's doing it on me. But for the people that are highly suggestible, they are the ones that usually can transform sometimes after just one session. And I had this one person who he was struggling with stage fright. He was struggling with anxiety and just didn't have the confidence that he wanted. And he didn't know, he felt like there was something wrong with him. He's like, I know I can do this. It's just for whatever reason, something's holding me back. I did one Zoom session with him. And the next time I talked to him, we just did an extra one for reinforcement. But the next time I talked to him, he said, he just told me this whole list of things that he got done in between the first session and our second session that he was just able to overcome. He was like, I went and performed, I went on stage, I did that, this, that, and the other. And I was like, oh, wow. And he's like, yeah, just that one session, I just feel amazing. It's like I'm a whole new person. So
that's amazing.
That was
what a score.
Yeah, that was one of my first clients. I was like, okay, that's
like, yeah, maybe this is a career for me then.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that. I've also worked with clients on boundary setting. People pleasing is a huge one. Self-sabotage. And I work in the world of addiction. So I'm always dealing with that and people having to, but it's not about the addiction a lot of times, right? It's like the other things that are underlying, like anxiety or, again, people pleasing. I honestly find that a lot of people who struggle with addiction, a lot of it comes down to a lack of boundaries and people pleasing when you really boil it down.
Well, let's get into that a little bit. Give us a little bit about what made you reach that assessment.
Honestly, I started to come across a lot of people who felt like they were doing everything. And so they were running around, they were doing everything. They felt totally overwhelmed. And then they would feel like, okay, at the end of the day, I get to have, let's say, a drink. I get to reward myself. And no one can say anything about it because I just did everything for everyone. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of like, their excuse in a way of like, I get to unwind. I get to have this one thing for myself after I've done everything for everyone else.
And right? so basically what I hear is like, after I've been overgiving, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay. You're right.
Abandoning myself. Yes.
Right. After I've done all of this shit to myself, I now need to reward myself, right, from all of the pain I've caused myself.
Exactly. And feeling taken advantage of and resentment and all these other things because no one can ever give me what I truly want from them. Right. Like, what I truly want is all this validation. And I want people to continually remind me of how great I am and all the things I do for them and how giving I am. But obviously, after a while, you're just training people that that's just what you do. So it's like, this is just their norm after a while. So they're not going to continually give you that praise. And, so that's kind of that core belief that if I do this, I get something in return. Right. And a lot of times we fall short.
And I think the overgiving thing, I just kind of came to mind just because I think we're very attuned right now in this world to healthcare workers. There are a lot of people in giving professions that overgive, or it's almost their Achilles heel. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think a lot of people in this world also who are in any sort of profession where they're helping others, you can definitely also slip into that over giving and wanting to maybe cross certain bounds of like, let me make sure that they remember this, or let me make sure that they do this and don't forget that. And it's like, okay, I need to stay in my own lane. You know, they need to work on that themselves. They need to empower themselves and recognize for themselves that they can have that sort of awareness and seek the answers that they're looking for.
Right. So, I mean, back to just again the topic of substance abuse in this arena that you're working in, like you mentioned, you're not really dealing with stop drinking or imposing. It's about uncovering the things behind the reason to do that.
Exactly. I barely ever even talk about the addiction piece. It's usually about like the dynamics in their relationships, their limiting beliefs, their core beliefs, especially. That's kind of why I wanted to go into mindset coaching, because I didn't even realize I was already practicing mindset coaching in a way. Because I want to basically boil down what is your core belief about yourself, about life, and about relationships, like the biggest things in our life that usually impact us. And once we recognize that, then we can kind of work on those things rather than the presenting issue, which is maybe addiction.
Right. You know, just because we've talked many times about this topic, and I just think it's kind of interesting. So I just want to bring this up for people that aren't aware. So, you know, you and I live in Los Angeles, and you work at a facility when you're not doing private clients. And a lot of these facilities are extremely expensive, right? So for those out there, like sometimes they're what, 40,000 a day, a week? Give us an example of like what some of these treatment centers that are all kind of right down the street from my house, what they charge.
100 to 120,000 a month.
Mm-hmm. Brutal. Okay. So now let's go to the case of, just because I find this a little bit fascinating. So let's say, this would be someone obviously who'd be very wealthy. And let's say they have a kid or a family member who is in recovery, and then they get out. They pay for what is called a sober companion. I was so shocked to hear how expensive that is. But can you tell us a little bit about what that is and like what that would entail when someone does that? I know you don't do it, but just because I find it very interesting in this world, just people might not be aware.
Yeah. So the company that I work with, that I usually refer clients to, what that entails is not just someone following you around. And that's the misconception a lot of times, is like, oh, this person just follows you around and makes sure you don't drink. Well, there's a lot of other things like building up your life, because this person is bridging the gap between you being in treatment and then you going back into the world, right? Because you're in treatment and then you're kind of like in this really safe space, right? You don't have to worry about any sort of triggers for the most part. So, and then you go back out in the world and then all these triggers come back and these boundary issues come back. So what happens is this sober companion comes in and they sort of work with you on, hey, how do we set up your foundation? And how do we set up a routine for you? How do we basically build your life the way that you want it to be built? So let's say meetings every week or every day. Okay, so these errands that you've been meaning to run for however long, we're going to get those done. We're going to tackle these things that have been hanging over you. We're going to maybe talk about the boundaries that need to be placed on certain people that are triggering you or certain toxic people that are in your life. So it's really a lot about that and helping the person as they go, because things are going to come up like resentments, or they're going to get maybe even mad about having a sober companion, maybe 2 weeks in, like, God,
I can see that.
Yeah. I have to talk a lot of my clients through that when they have their sober companion. I have to just be like, remember, you made this choice. This is not something that is happening to you. You made this choice when you were in your wise mind to go, I can't trust myself. And I can't trust that if I, get angry, that I'm not going to go out and drink. So I need to make sure I have that sort of buffer. And just knowing that person is there can just make a huge difference. So even if they were to, let's say, go out to the corner store real fast, knowing that they're going to come back to someone could make all the difference to them. Like I'm being held accountable in some way.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a big one.
And also too, like if it's a son or a daughter of someone that's paying for it, it's even extra accountability because like that sober companion is going to go tell on your shit. If you're like, you kind of have a little bit of a narc nearby who's which is a positive thing for this particular situation. I just thought that was fascinating. And then tell us again, hey, for you guys looking for a profession, this is extremely lucrative. Tell us roughly how much a sober companion can make in a month.
Yeah. Sober companion can make up to 70,000 a month.
Wow, everybody. If you heard that, I was so shocked when I initially heard that from Lauren when we were talking offline before. Amazing. Now, you're earning every penny of that. That's not a fun, that can be rough depending on who the client is. So you certainly are earning it, and you might need, actually, I wonder if how many sober companions need to contact you to get hypnosis to get out of their vibes being around that kind of energy.
Yes.
Okay. So I just thought that was just very fascinating for people that don't understand the addiction world, or even just how much these sort of things cost when you're talking about entering into one of these, famous facilities you hear about these celebrities going to, but also very wealthy people. Okay, let's talk a little bit about boundaries and mindset. Let's talk a little bit about some clients or experiences you've had or things that you've noticed. Is there a specific theme of something that you're like, I see this one all the time, like people inability to create boundaries here or there, or is it everywhere? But give us the themes that come up most for you and your clients.
So codependency is a huge one. Yeah, I see a lot of times and where I have to keep reminding the client to stay in their lane because they keep wanting to go, but if I do this, they're going to feel or think or no. We're getting that. It doesn't matter right now. Let's just shelve that for right now. What they're going to think, what they're going to feel, right? We're just trying to stick to our lane of what we want and what would be beneficial to us, what would be helpful to us. So basically just bringing someone back into their own lane is a huge one that I have to work on with clients. Another one that I find comes up often is that there's this sort of self-sabotage that happens. And, a lot of times people come back and they're like, I don't understand. I thought I had it all. And it was all set in stone. I had this routine and these things that I was doing, and I don't know what happened. Well, sometimes what happens is that, let's say in our family, we didn't, let's say, get enough attention growing up, or we didn't get our needs met. And let's say that when we suddenly are struggling, or we have an addiction, now suddenly everyone is rallying around us and everyone is caring and how can I help you? And they're involved, and right. The focus is on us. So we're getting that need met that we've so desperately wanted met for so long. So then when let's say we become sober, we have our shit together, suddenly everyone goes back to living their lives and they're not so involved in our life and they're not calling us and showing that care that we wanted. So now there's no incentive for us deep down to stay sober. And so we relapse, right? So it's a victim attention getting thing subconsciously buried there. That's sort of, yes. Yes. And it's totally subconscious. Like, and I've had to have like,
same thing with sickness, by the way, too, right? So it doesn't even have to, right? It could be, I have known a few people, luckily none of my clients, but I have known a few people in life who are addicted to their state of unhealth, right? And so, because they get that sympathy. And it's funny because in those situations, a couple have been friends with family members going through this. They have had to, almost like alcoholics, cut them off, stop enabling the behavior. So when they call and they're like, oh, my thing, and they're complaining, the person now is just like, sorry to hear that. Anyway, you know what I mean? Like not indulging in it anymore. It's almost like the same practice that you would do with someone, you're enabling with alcohol, maybe, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good comparison because that's exactly it. Same with like depression or anxiety. And, not to dismiss people that are really struggling with those things. It's just that sometimes we don't even realize that we don't actually want to get rid of those things or help ourselves
because of what those things give us attention wise or feeling wise from other people.
Exactly. Right? Exactly. Who would I be without my depression? Who would I be without my anxiety? Right? Who would I be without my addiction? So that's scary for a lot of people. And the subconscious mind doesn't like scary. And that's also unfamiliar if we have our shit together. Right? So it's always trying to keep us in our safe zone of what we know, which is maybe depression, anxiety, or addiction.
What's one of your favorite success stories, whether it's from someone else or yourself with a client that was just like, to this day is like, that one stands out?
I would say it's actually a client I'm still working with. I have worked with her for less than a year, and I just feel like she is so ready to do the work. And that's what I love. Like a client that comes to me and of course wants help, but is also willing to do the work. Like that is just, it's hard to believe how rare that is sometimes, because they want the change, but kind of without doing the work. It's like, oh, just hypnotize me and fix me. But, so the fact that she actually does we set these little goals and she'll do those things, and they're really hard for her, like setting boundaries. Like she'll tell me these horror stories of friends taking total advantage of her. And she, lets this sort of thing happen because she doesn't like confrontation. She doesn't want them to be mad at her. She feels like she's going to lose that friendship and be abandoned. So she doesn't set these boundaries. And it could be something as simple as her friend took her clothes without asking and didn't bring them back to her, and she's asking for her clothes back. Like,
right. And by the way, that's such a great example right there. I just want to highlight that.
Mm-hmm.
It often starts with these small, this, we've talked about this before. Like it starts with the small things, right? It's like speaking up to the hairdresser because they're not giving me the haircut they want, or like, right. Sometimes it's these little things that someone listening will go, well, that's dumb, and just say something. But you're like, no, for a lot of people that's difficult. And it starts there with just being like, hey, you borrowed some clothes. Can I have them back? Like, you know what I mean? But some people can't speak up.
Exactly. And there's so many childhood traumas that we don't even realize. Sometimes we're not even aware of the correlation. So we have maybe this subconscious association with, let's say, if I speak up and share my needs, people will leave me. We don't know that we're operating from that per se sometimes, but we may have that for some reason, because maybe our parent took off when we were a kid and we blamed ourselves. We were like, maybe if I wasn't so needy, or maybe if I, didn't ask for these things, or, whatever, then maybe they would still be around. So we don't know sometimes how they manifest themselves, but they do. And I see it all the time. And that's why the inner child work can be so beneficial, to just kind of go back and see the cause. Because a lot of times, it's not that we want to stay there and just focus on, oh, well, these things happen to you, so no wonder you're this way, and we're just going to
right. It's not an excuse. It's a reason. It's not an excuse. Yeah,
exactly. And it can just help us go, okay, it doesn't mean that there's something just inherently wrong with me. It's just, obviously that would maybe make a kid feel this way and internalize it this way. And that can manifest itself into my adulthood.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, also too, so I guess really, what am I wrong in saying that hypnosis is reprogramming one's subconscious mind? It's just one tool to do that?
Yes, absolutely.
So this can be done for anything. Like, we could come to you with like, I've got a terrible way I think about money, any kind of thing that's tripping you up. It really doesn't matter what the topic is. It's nice that you also deal with people with addiction. So if someone's out there listening and they need help with that, you're an expert there. But it's all of these other arenas. It could be anything, right? It could be pregnancy. It could be anything that's stumping you, or that you're upset about, or that keeps coming up as a theme. And so I just want to open that up, because anyone can reach out to you for a multitude of reprogramming.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So many different things. And even with addiction, I like to also apply addiction to drama, to anger, to, food. There's so many different things that we can be addicted to. And,
on that note, I want to throw this out there because it makes me think of a friend of mine who's been in recovery for like 20 years for sex love addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And so the thing about him is, now in hindsight, after 20 years, he can say that back then, it really wasn't about the sex for him. It was about the drama in the love shit. This drama, this constant like drama he was always involved in. And I remember even at the time when we were younger, I'd be like, dude, man, it's like always drama with chicks. Like, this is just like, what the fuck? Like, you know what I mean? And I didn't, I just said that flippantly when we were really, really young. And then years later, he was like, oh, by the way, and he heard, I guess he was talking about his drama tribulations with a friend, and they had been in sex love addiction. They're like, hey man, I think you might have an issue here. So for him, it really wasn't about like, I need to go out and have sex with as many people. That really wasn't it. It was just it was addiction to the drama.
Mm-hmm. No, that's such a good point, because he comes in, let's say, to get help for the presenting issue, which is, oh, I have a sex addiction, right? Or a love addiction. But then what he uncovers is what he, like his associations, or again, like what is actually happening that he's actually addicted to, like you said, is when you boil it down, the drama, the chaos of it. Right.
And also in that note, sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, sometimes that's also the very thing that keeps us distracted from, let's say, some internal pain that we have, right? Like if I keep my life in this drama mode, then I'm distracting myself of the issues that I have within me, or my sadness, my internal sadness that I feel, by keeping this chaos going, right? And it could be feeling so exhilarating and so fun and exciting, right? It's
these dopamine hits, whether they're negative or positive. Yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah. And, in his case, and I thought this was interesting, it was basically because he didn't feel worthy enough as a person. And so he was that person that would intentionally, he was like, I was always trying to get someone to either like sleep with me or fall in love with me or whatever. And then it was like, aha, I did it, and it was sort of like a trick almost. And he goes, and I'd always feel worse afterwards, because what he would do is he was that person that would trigger other people. So he literally would admit that he would find in a girlfriend whatever they felt insecure about, and then make a flippant comment about it to see if he could get a reaction out of them. And, hearing someone actually admit the details of what this entails, very mature. I mean, years later, I thought it was great that he was so open and just sharing how he did it. He's like, that's what I would do. I would just say, like, if someone was insecure about something, I would kind of make a flippant comment about it. And I would get off on kind of seeing them be hurt by it, like that I had some control. And he goes, and I'd play that game, and then I'd always feel even worse afterwards, but then he's addicted. So he'd go back again, you know what I mean? It's like, and so finally he's out of it. Right. And I mean, he's still in the practice of, he still goes to meetings, but he's in a really great place after so many years. And I've never met anyone except for him who's been through that. And I thought it was interesting because it really was addiction to the drama in love. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's really powerful. And that's huge for him to be able to admit that. Cause my God, most people would never want to admit something like that.
Exactly. I think that's what 20 years of it probably gets you to that point where you have no shame about the shame.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny you say that too, because I have a client that I'm working with right now who kind of has that same mentality, where he will really kind of know how to push buttons, and he'll just like know how to go for the jugular. And but yeah, there's other things that we're kind of working on with his situation, but it's very similar to what you're talking about. So maybe I should refer him to some sort of love addiction and sex addiction treatment.
Let's finish up by saying, how has it benefited you, having hypnosis done to you in the past? Like, what was your experience with it, and how did it benefit your personal life?
Well, my mom was a hypnotherapist. She became a hypnotherapist when I was 14, and I kind of thought it was her own little woo-woo thing that she did. I didn't have any interest in it until I was 20, when I started struggling with panic attacks. And my mom suggested that I go and see a hypnotherapist for my panic attacks. And for months I was struggling. And then finally, when I saw this hypnotherapist, I just totally changed. It was amazing. I just didn't feel that recurring fear of having the panic attack, because that's what happens. It's like Pandora's box. Once you open it, it's like now you're scared of having a panic attack. So luckily that's my introduction to hypnosis, and kind of changed my mind, and was like, oh, maybe there's something here. And when I was in my late 20s, fast forward to my late 20s, and by the way, that was only one session that I had too. It wasn't like I did keep going. I had one session, and I felt transformed. And then later in my late 20s, I kind of was like, I want to go into coaching somehow, like maybe relationship coaching or life coaching. I had a lot of friends that would always come to me for advice. And my mom suggested that I go to hypnotherapy school like she did, because she showed me that it wasn't just hypnosis that you learn about. She's like, you learn about relationships, you learn about inner child, some, cognitive behavioral therapy, like the basic stuff of cognitive behavioral therapy, but it's all about behavior modification. So so then I went to school. I decided to do that, and I loved it. And then what I really love is that I found my calling, because for so much of my life was like, I have no idea what I want to do with my life. I'd go in one direction, the other, and I was always trying to figure it out. And then finally, when I landed in this profession, what I love is that it's just endless with possibilities. Like there's just so much that you can learn. There's so much more you can incorporate and add. And it's amazing in that way. So I'm always engaged. I'm always taking courses. I just really, really love it. But
I wonder too, I mean, am I stretching it by saying that because I kind of believe it could be beneficial for someone who's confused about their life purpose to work with you through hypnosis to possibly uncover some things there. I mean, that seems like that's even a modality that would be beneficial for that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the time it's because we're denying what we truly are attracted to, or we're maybe, because let's say we have some sort of programming that we're supposed to do X, Y, and Z profession in order to be successful. Like that's what the family messaging was, let's say, when we were growing up. So we're kind of blocking our ability to access what we actually want to do and what we're drawn towards. So hypnosis can really help reveal that to oneself, and definitely taking action. Like that's the biggest thing. Like as much as hypnosis and all these things and mindset coaching are great, action at the end of the day is what matters most. You cannot just do this and not take action. You have to take action, even if it's small, because it's just at least showing yourself like, maybe I'm going to take action and I'm going to go and, volunteer in this sort of industry or this field, and I'm going to see if I like it or not. Right. Because there's so many nuances in a profession that you don't know until you're in it. So a lot of times people just want to kind of sit around and think more about what maybe they want to do with their life, but actually it takes doing and trying and trial and error in order to finally get to that point where you know what your calling is.
Oh, and I see that all the time, as I'm sure you do, which is you have to take one step towards something you're interested in. That may not be the thing, but that could lead to the other thing. And you don't even fucking know yet because you didn't even take a step. And like you said, even if it's like, oh, I'm going to go volunteer in this thing, or I'm going to go call someone who does this for a job, you'd be surprised. I've taken so many steps, and then in that step and like, oh, fuck this. But you know what? Glad I tried it. But no way. No, thank you. Glad I did, because now I have no regrets and it's not lingering in the back of my mind, but no fucking thanks. So I think that is such a great message. I mean, that's probably the biggest. If you're seeking out help from anybody, a coach, a course, or Lauren as a coach / hypnotherapist, you've got to be willing, right, to do something. And sometimes, like you said, they're just small steps. No one asking you to, if you have stage fright, no one's asking you to jump on stage right away. You know what I mean? That's not what you would suggest. It's baby steps towards that. So I love this so much. I'm so fascinated by your profession and what you do. And for everyone out there, we'll put it in the show notes, but Lauren's website is lgmhypnosis.com. So you can connect with her there. Is there anything you'd like to leave with our audience?
I feel, again, I'm going to bring it back to stay in your lane.
Yep.
Stay in your lane and recognize when you're not in your lane, and self-compassion. So when you're in your lane with yourself, have self-compassion. Those are the biggest things I feel that a lot of this comes down to, and giving yourself that grace.
I love it. Thank you so much for joining us. And for everyone else, we'll see you next time.
Hey listeners, over the years, a ton of companies have approached me to collaborate, but I will only promote companies whose products I believe in and that I actually use and consume on a regular basis. So let me tell you about some of my favorite companies that I can offer you discounts for. Rep Provisions, an amazing company doing incredible things for our planet, topsoil, and animals with regenerative agriculture, and it's my #1 source for quality pasture-raised meat and chicken. Visit repprovisions.com and use code L15 for 15% off. I'm also obsessed with a company called Carnivore Crisps. They make a lean, all-natural, and delicious alternative to conventional snacking, made with just real meat and real salt. Totally addictive, and my favorite ones are the beef brisket and the ribeye. Visit carnivorecrisps.com and use code PALEO10 for 10% off. I also love and regularly use Paleo Valley products. They make amazing supplements and delicious paleo products. I use the superfood greens powder, grass-fed beef sticks, the organ complex, and their bone broth bars. I love the lemon and apple. I also use their essential C complex and more. Visit paleovalley.com/promos/Elle Russ for 15% off. I also love Primal Kitchen. They make delicious paleo-approved, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, and no refined sugar products. And I use them daily, from their collagen powders and sauces and marinades to their avocado and olive oil. So good, so healthy. Visit primalkitchen.com and use code L10 for 10% off. I also love paleo powder and use it almost on everything I cook. They make incredible seasoning blends, and they also have these incredible grain-free coatings that feel just like crispy breadings that you would have had prior to knowing that there's another way. So visit paleopowder.com and use code L15 for 15% off.